In fact, I was thinking, I don't know if you read Michael Connelly, but
Yes, I do.
Void Moon, I thought, just set itself up to be a movie. You know, you have the guy going out the window in Las Vegas and all, and I said to myself, we're going to come back to this, you know, because it would make such a dynamite end to the movie. And then the book's been out, so I think I can say this, we get to the end, and of course, you know, there's another giant defenestration scene.
Right.
And, you know, it was just, I mean, and Michael, because I know him well, and when my husband and I were having dinner with him last year, he wrote it to be a movie. He really wants a movie.
Well, see, that's something I don't really understand.
You don't live in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, but yeah, that's true. Deep in my heart, I don't care about movies. I really don't care about movies. One of my books was made into an ABC television movie, and they had an opening, and I didn't go to it because I didn't. I mean, I was invited, and my son went actually, but I went fishing in Florida instead because I guess I was more interested in fishing in Florida than I was in going to a movie opening. But I guess there's some kind of prestige and stuff attached to having your books made into a movie. But frankly, if you don't deep in your heart care about whether they're made into movies, and if you just focus on books, it's much more lucrative. Writing, I mean, I hate to keep coming back to this money thing, but that's one of the realities in the world.
Sure.
And the fact is that pushing a book up the bestseller list is much more lucrative than screenwriting. There are very few screenwriters who make as much as $250,000 a year writing screenplays, and usually it takes years to get something made into a movie. It's not just a one-time thing. And the fact is that, well, we were talking in the car on the way over here. Mary Higgins Clark just got a $64 million deal for writing 4 novels and a memoir, $15 million apiece for the novels. So she is making, what is that, 60 times as much as a really top-ranked screenwriter. And she can do it every year without too much trouble.
Right.
So, I mean, if you really want to be one of those movie guys, and if you really think that you're going to be skiing next year at Afton, at Aspen with, you know, with Jack and the crowd, then maybe you want to do that. But I have a feeling that what you're going to do is you're going to be in some little cement block building over in West Hollywood someplace, you know, sweating out the changes in the screenplay.
Well, it's a different medium. And, you know, I think people, particularly people who live in California, in LA and whatever it is, it's a different way of telling a story. And it may be that their whole drive is, I haven't really discussed it with them, to be honest, is not about money, but is about just being in this, seeing it.
Yeah, but, you know, well, I'm a movie buff, and I've got dozens, or maybe even hundreds now of CDs, or not CDs, but DVDs, because I really like movies a lot. But I only like them for the story, not for the production. And there's one thing, I'd like to talk to Connelly about this. I met him at the LA Book Fair a couple of years ago, and he seems like a heck of a nice guy. And Bob Crace, I think, is going the same way. I think that he would really like to make a movie, and this book seems like it'd be a terrific movie. It's got a wonderful woman main character. It's got some nice secondary characters. It just seems to be built for a movie.
Right.
It could just make a great movie. It's a good book, too. But most book guys are the kind of people who like to go off in a small room for 7 or 8 months at a time, listen to a little music, and write a book for 5 or 6 hours a day. At least that's how I do it. Movies are the most social thing in the world. You've got a huge amount of money. You've got bankers involved. You've got a producer involved. You've got a director involved. You've got these big stars. You've got a lot of secondary stars. Of all those people, it seems to me like the screenwriter is sort of the last of the really critical people in the group, and so it becomes a social occasion. I mean, not, you know, like a party, but I mean it becomes a very social activity in which a lot of people have to cooperate to make a thing, and that doesn't seem like, that's not what I do as a writer. I mean, I make all the decisions. So.
Well, it isn't. Bob wrote a lot of television and so forth, so he probably has some idea of what it's all about. Michael, like you, is a journalist, a reporter, coming along. Sue Grafton did her thing in Hollywood and turned her back on it because she prefers the whole description you just gave of, you know, being the writer and doing it that way, doesn't want to get back to the Hollywood thing. It may be something that Michael just wants to do to find out how it is, you know, like whatever, you know, taking a trip or something, and then when it's over, it's over.
There was a woman who left St. Paul for, a friend of mine who left St. Paul for Hollywood, could have written novels. She certainly had the ability to do it. She was a journalist. Went out to L.A. with her husband, who was covered Los Angeles covered the movie industry for the Wall Street Journal. But she wrote a movie. That was pretty much what she was interested in doing right from the start. It was writing movies. She knew all about the differences in the money and all that kind of stuff. But what she wanted to do is write movies. So, I mean, you know, so that's what it is.
True, and not for you, as we have discussed. Well, tell me something. I think it would be interesting to know, how did you get to this gig? I mean, I know that you were a newspaper reporter for years, and there must be something about the Miami Herald that incubates writers.
Well, the Miami Herald, well, it's not, I don't think it's the Herald so much as the Miami culture. It's just an insane place. Miami's been called the Casablanca of America because it's got all these different ethnic groups vying with each other. There used to be a problem with the Herald of what to call people if you were trying to put some kind of a label on them. You know, because it was split between, at one time, for example, they'd say so-and-so is black, so-and-so is Cuban, or so-and-so is Anglo. And then the Jews, who make up a huge portion of people down there, say, I'm an Anglo, or the Italians, you know, that I'm an Anglo. Then the Cubans, it didn't make any difference whether you were black or not, or white, you were Cuban. So a black guy would say, I'm not black, I'm a Cuban. And then, so I mean, you know, you couldn't, there were no labels that fit anybody, or maybe there were 20 labels that fit everybody. It was just an insane place that way. It was, I mean, you had this huge amounts of drug money. I mean, there were so many drugs it got to be a joke. And the drug people would talk to the newspaper people. And I mean, and you would wind up, you know, doing stories. I had a guy who was in the penitentiary forever, I hope, who called me from jail in Key West, where he's on trial for murder, to tell me that I was messing up his family name because his family was famous in the construction business in Miami, and he was one of the first big cocaine importers who sort of did it on a corporate basis, where they had like a board of directors and they had people who were paid to deliver it and all this kind of stuff. And he was spending $1 million a year in the 1970s pretty much on women. I mean, and that whole scene was so crazy that that I think that people who might have a tendency toward wanting to write a lot got drawn into it.
Because there were so many good stories?
All of South Florida. I mean, Tom McGuane was in Key West, and even Jimmy Buffett, who's written a couple of books, was in Key West. Carl Hyacin lives halfway down the Keys now. I just talked to him a couple days ago. He actually is not only an old friend of mine, but I was his editor for a while. He worked for me in the Fort Lauderdale Bureau. Edna Buchanan, I used to put my feet up on her desk, and she'd come around and kick them off. Edna and I worked on a couple of really brutal murder cases together.
Did you?
And Dave Barry I never met. He came there a little bit after I left, but I think that people who are interested in writing get pulled into that kind of scene. I mean, they go to New York, they go to L.A., and they go to Miami. And then, of course, there's always the Texas group, which they're just kind of celebrate Texas. And, you know, so.
Well, we're almost the same age, so I, was able to sort of track you along for a while. What was the bit you did in Korea? It was way too late for the Korean War. Were you over there just doing some kind of?
No, I was in the Army.
You were in the Army.
I was in the Army, but too late for the Korean War. I was over there in the middle 60s, and there have been 50,000 American soldiers there since the Korean War. The Korean War never ended. It was always it was just an armistice. One of the things that I have friends who are pretty bitter about what happened in Korea when I was there, because when I was there, a lot of people were killed. That was when the Pueblo incident took place, which you may or may not remember. There was a big hassle about a thing called a boat.
It was a ship, wasn't it?
No, it was a ship that was captured by North Koreans,
right.
An American military vessel, and the guys on board were pretty severely mistreated, and several people were killed in the takeover. And there were a lot of people killed along the DMZ, but everything, there was never any recognition of that by anybody because the United States was involved in the war in Vietnam at the time, and they didn't want it to look like the war was spreading.
Right.
So there was a controversy in Congress about even whether people who were shot should get combat pay because they weren't in a combat zone, although they were being shot. And so anyway, that's when I was there. I was in Korea in the middle 60s in the Army, and I enjoyed it.